We're looking forward to spending about the next hour with you. And as Carissa mentioned in the introduction, this is the second in our series of Level Up webinars. Now, many of you would have been with us from the onset, but for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we in the first session gave an overview of my upcoming book. And we're not going to tell you the title of the book just yet, but our working title for the webinar series is Level Up: Transition from Line Staff to Leader. And when we had our first webinar, we pointed out that there are three primary challenges which managers face. The first one is managing self, and that's going to be our focus for this evening. Next week, we'll talk about the second challenge, which is managing others. And then the following week, on July 15th, we'll deal with the third challenge, which is managing systems and processes. So even if you weren't with us the last time, you can still pick up and follow along with us. And we also want to let you know that there's a recording of the first webinar that's available, and you can go to either my website or the Meraki website, and you'll be able to watch that recording so that you don't miss out on anything. So, ever wonder why we don't have unicorns anymore? Well, here's the story. Turns out that they weren't paying attention, so they missed Noah's Ark. So this is a word of caution for you. The time to level up is now. You don't want to go the way of the unicorns, that you're, a day late, $1 short, and you miss out on the opportunity to really level up and achieve your full potential. So as Carissa indicated, this is not an occasion when you're going to be passively standing by. We're going to be getting you involved. And so let's jump right in with an opinion poll. And so here's the question for you. In order to be a successful manager, I need to leave my feelings at the door and just focus on the facts and figures. Is that true or false? So I'm going to ask Carissa to go ahead and launch that poll so that you can all weigh in. So you should see the poll on your screen. Okay, I see the numbers racking up there. So go ahead and fill that in for us. You have just a few more seconds to get that done, and then we will share the results with you. Some people are taking a while to decide. We only have 72% weighing in so far, so give it a little bit more time, Chris, and then we will see what the overall tally is. Don't be shy, the results are anonymous, so we don't know who's saying what. Okay, Carissa, let's go ahead and close that out now, please. So the results are in, and we had 62% of you saying that that's false, and the remaining 38% saying that it is true. So let me take you out of your suspense and share that it is in fact false. So the reality is, you need to combine the facts and the figures with something else, which we're going to talk about, in order for you to have the best possible outcomes. So this is where we're going to spend our time for this evening's webinar. We're going to start talking about emotional intelligence, which some of you may have figured out that's what we were alluding to in the last poll. Then we're going to talk about developing winning habits. before we move on to getting ready for when the buck stops, and we're going to leave you in suspense in terms of how you get ready for when the buck stops with you. And then our final topic for this evening is replenishing your cup. So Carissa would have mentioned the book previously, and these topics that you're seeing here in our presentation outline, these are all chapters within the book. So it's not all of the chapters within the Managing Self section of the book, but we're just giving you a little sample. And so let's delve into emotional intelligence. And we have a quotation here. Emotional intelligence, more than any other factor, more than IQ or expertise, accounts for 85 to 90% of your success at work. That's a really high percentage, 85 to 90% of your success at work. Now, don't get us wrong. You need IQ as a threat, what we refer to as a threshold competence. You need it. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. IQ alone will not make you a star. So again, we're encouraging you to use the chat box. Does this surprise you in terms of how high the percentage is? Vis-a-vis the importance of emotional intelligence and it accounting for your success? If you had to guess, would you have guessed as high as 85 or 90% of your success being due to emotional intelligence? So what is emotional intelligence anyway? And so we have a definition that I'm sharing here with you. So it's sometimes referred to as EQ, sometimes it's referred to as EI, but emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage, first of all, our own emotions. And you might think it's strange that we're talking about recognizing our own emotions. There are actually some of us who cannot articulate what we're feeling. It's almost like a binary. We have a very limited vocabulary to discuss emotions. So someone might say, oh, I know I'm happy or I know I'm sad. But there's a whole spectrum in between happy and sad. Okay? So in the first instance, the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions. But it doesn't stop there. Emotional intelligence also gives us the ability to recognize, understand, and influence, because we can't manage other people's emotions, but we can influence the emotions of others. So that, in essence, is emotional intelligence. Let's delve a little bit more deeply. And so what we have here is a 2x2 matrix which shows you the different components in emotional intelligence. And this is something for you to remember, these 4 elements that make up emotional intelligence. And so we'll start with self-awareness. Again, as we heard in the definition just now, this refers to your ability to recognize your emotions, to understand them, and to manage them. So that's self-awareness. And adjacent to self-awareness, we come over to the management aspect of it, because it's one thing to be able to acknowledge and understand your emotions, but you don't want to be at your emotions whim and fancy. Okay, so that's where the management component comes in. So the second component of emotional intelligence relates to managing and expressing your emotions. So you use your awareness of your emotions to inform your choices. And choices is really important in this context. We're going to take a deeper dive on that in just a few moments. But I want you to make a mental link between emotional intelligence and choice. So your self-management informs your flexibility, your adaptability, your initiative, and very importantly, impulse control. So those are the personal attributes: self-awareness, self-management. When we come to the social attributes, because even though we're talking about managing self, ourselves exist in a social context. So part of managing self means that when we're really good at it, we can identify the emotions of other people. So we learn to read them and to understand the other person's perspective. And the word that we use in relation to that is empathy. Empathy, the ability to understand and appreciate the other person's perspective. Also on the social attribute side, we have relationship management, because we all exist in social relationships, whether it's at work, within our family setting, within our circle of friends. So under relationship management, we use the emotional awareness both of ourselves and of others in order to develop rapport and to have effective, mutually beneficial relationships. It's also relationship management that enables us to be good leaders, to influence others, and to successfully navigate conflict. So again, these are the 4 elements of emotional intelligence. So we're going to peel away the layers a bit. So remember the first component, self-awareness. What you have on the screen before you right now is what's called Johari Window. And the name is kind of strange, but it's made up of parts of the first names of the 2 individuals who came up with the model. So it was Joe and Harry, and so they call the model the Johari Window. So again, it's a 2x2 matrix, and I'm going to take you through each of the quadrants in the Johari window. And we'll start with what is labeled as the open area. And as we read the labels on this 2x2 matrix, we see that the open area is made up of that information that is known to self and known to others. So for example, right now in my open area is the fact if you're looking at your screen, it's in my open area that I'm wearing a black top. I know it, you know it because you can see it, and I know it because I put it on this evening. Okay, so that's what's known to self and to others. So there are lots of things about you that are in your open area, and it's particularly applicable to things that can be seen, okay? But there are other things in your open area that people who have known you for a while will be able to say about you, okay? So that's your open area. Next, I draw your attention to the hidden area. The hidden area is immediately below the open area, and if you read the labels, you'll see that your hidden area consists of those things that you know about yourself, but which are unknown to others. Now, I should say here that even though the model that you have before you shows all 4 quadrants to be the same size, if you think about it in real life, it's not that case, because there may be more or less in your hidden area than in your open area. So second quadrant, known to self, unknown to others. Those are the things that for the time being, you're keeping private. Or it could be it's just certain people that don't know about it. So your very close friends, your family may know about it, but the people at work, it would be in the hidden area for them. Okay, so that's the second quadrant. I go next to the unknown area. And this refers to things that others don't know about you and you don't know about yourself either. And yes, there are things that can be in this quadrant. I can give you an example from my life experience a few years ago. I went to the doctor for a routine checkup, and she suggested, my GP, that I have a colonoscopy based on how old I was. She said, you know what, let's do a routine colonoscopy. Unknown to me, unknown to my doctor, I had colon cancer. Because she was so proactive, it moved from an unknown area to an open area. She became aware, I became aware, and we were able to do what we needed to do so that now I can say that I'm a cancer survivor as opposed to someone who is suffering from cancer. So see how important it can be to move things from your unknown area to your open area. And the fourth and final quadrant now is the blind area. And I save this for last because we're really going to take a deep dive on it. So as you can see from the labels on the 2x2 matrix, your blind area consists of things that are unknown to you, but which are known to others. And yes, indeed, there are things about ourselves that we don't know, but which other people know. And it's not just about you. We all have blind spots. And the challenge with having blind spots in the context of being a manager is that if you don't know something, you can't manage it. Right? And remember, emotional intelligence is not just about being aware of something, but having become aware of it, you then need to manage it. So there's so many other things that once you have the awareness, you then proceed to manage. How do we become aware of things that were previously in our blind spot? One of the ways is by soliciting feedback. And, feedback is something that sometimes is not that easy to hear. But I invite you to consider it in this way. Feedback is information. It's a gift. It is a truth. It can be somebody else's truth. It doesn't need to be your truth. But the thing is, once you get that feedback, you then have information that you didn't have previously. And if it's not your truth, then you can begin to take steps to manage perceptions and to clarify misperceptions. And so my final thought.
Here for a minute, we have a question in the chat box on the unknown area asking how often the unknown area becomes, or how often, I think what they're trying to communicate is how often can you move something from the unknown area to the open or known area?
You can move it as often as you make the effort to do so. So if you actively solicit feedback, if you actively are curious about how people perceive you, you can move things from your unknown area into the open area. It depends on your motivation, but you have to be willing to be vulnerable, because some of the things you're going to hear may not be that complimentary. Okay, but again, it's information, it's a gift, and you can then decide what you're going to do with it. Thank you for that question. Okay, so we're going to move on from self-awareness. Remember, this is the first of 4 elements in emotional intelligence. The second element is self-management or self-regulation. So, fun fact for you. You may have heard of the fight or flight response. And that is an automatic response, which is triggered in a certain part of our brain called the amygdala. And it takes 30 milliseconds for the amygdala to be triggered. Whereas a thinking response, one in which you make a decision to do something, takes 250 milliseconds. 30 versus 250. You see how many times you can get hijacked before you can even think about what you want to do? And so it's important for us to develop the ability to control that instinctual hijack, that fight or flight mechanism. Now, where does it come from? Now, this is historic. So in the days, so they say, in the days when we were in caves and hunting and so on, and were afraid of being caught by lions and tigers, we had to respond very quickly. And that's where the fight or flight response developed. But the thing is, chances are, whether you're in Antigua, Barbados, Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, in the US, I don't think lions and tigers are there to get you anymore. So you don't need to respond in that 30 seconds. Rather, what we encourage you to do is develop emotional agility. And what do we mean by emotional agility? Remember, I said choice was going to be very important as we spoke about emotional intelligence. Emotional agility is the ability to choose how to respond rather than just reacting. When you get hijacked, when your amygdala takes over, you've been hijacked, you've reacted as opposed to responding. So that's another key takeaway for you. The difference between a reaction and a response is choice. Choice. Now, the thing is, you may make a choice to run away so that your response is the same as your reaction. But the thing is, you chose to do it as opposed to being hijacked by your emotions. So emotional agility. Okay, and Carissa, please feel free to let me know if there are any additional questions showing up in the chat box that I need to address as we go along, okay? So folks, again, very important distinction for you, reaction versus response. So I want to illustrate a choice here, how we communicate, how we express ourselves. And if you look to the left of the screen, you'll see there's an arrow that's labeled passive. To the far right of the screen, there's an arrow that's labeled aggressive. And these are opposite ends of a spectrum. If you're passive, you subdue your own feelings in deference to someone else. So you may allow yourself to be disrespected and in giving in to someone else. At the other end of the spectrum, you have aggressive. In the case where you show up as being aggressive, you are expressing your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions without giving someone else the space to do the same. So if your voice is the loudest voice in the room, you're the one taking up all the oxygen. No one else is getting an opportunity to contribute to the conversation. You're on the aggressive side of the spectrum. Where we encourage you to be in the context of emotional intelligence is in the middle, where you are assertive. And what does assertive mean? It means that you respect your right to an opinion and perspective, as well as the other individual's right to an opinion and perspective. And so in the communication, in the dialogue, you create the space for both parties to participate in the discussion. Okay, so that's one example of how you can choose to express yourself with emotional intelligence. And that will, of course, help you to develop better quality relationships, both on the job and in the rest of your life. Okay. So we're going now from the personal attributes, where we had self-awareness and self-management or regulation, to now we're looking at social awareness. And social awareness refers to the ability to accurately, and notice accurately is important, because you don't want to be making assumptions, think that you're reading the room and reading it incorrectly. So social awareness, as a component of emotional intelligence, is your ability to accurately pick up on emotions in other people, to understand what's going on with them, to perceive what they're thinking and what they're feeling. You are socially aware. And I want to highlight here, I said it with the lead quotation on emotional intelligence. This is not about how bright you are, because I'm sure if you think about it, you can think about a really intelligent person who just seems to be clueless when it comes to reading a room or understanding other people. So that's why emotional intelligence is so important, because cognitive intelligence on its own is not enough for you to succeed. Remember the lead quotation, 85 to 90% of your success is going to be contingent on your level of emotional intelligence. Okay, fourth and final component, relationship management. Okay, and there's a whole toolkit that goes along with relationship management, because you want to be able to inspire, to influence, to develop and maintain healthy and mutually beneficial relationships. And so here's a listing of just some of the skills that you're going to need: effective communication, interpersonal effectiveness. You need to be able to persuade and influence. And in webinar number 1, we talked about the laws of persuasion and influence. Conflict management. Conflict is inevitable, but it's not necessarily a bad thing, because out of conflict, you can get richer solutions. It's how you handle the conflict. Okay? You want to be able to inspire those that you're seeking to lead. In the context of COVID-19, if you didn't believe it before, by now you should be persuaded that change is inevitable. Who could have predicted what has happened to the entire world in the last 4 months? So one of the facets of emotional intelligence, one of the facets of relationship management, is for you to be able to drive change and to successfully navigate change. As a manager, as a leader, building bonds with your direct reports, with your peers, with those senior to you in the organization, with your clients or customers, with your suppliers, relationships matter. And with emotional intelligence, you can build and sustain mutually beneficial relationships. Most of us work within a team context. Emotional intelligence will help us to navigate that as well. As a manager, you're expected to coach and mentor your direct reports. You may have opportunity even within a church environment, in a social club, to be doing coaching and mentoring. Emotional intelligence is essential to that. And trust. Trust. You're going to hear about trust in this webinar. You're going to hear about trust in the next webinar and the one after that. Trust is a fundamental building block to managerial success. If your people don't trust you, you are destined to fail. Okay, so we've covered the 4 elements of emotional intelligence. Carissa, any questions
Yes,
before?
we do have a question. And that question is, how quickly should you move from what I see to what I do?
Okay, so there is no fixed answer, because as you mature, and that's one of the beautiful things about emotional intelligence, you can grow it. So while your IQ is essentially fixed, you can grow your EQ. And as you become more emotionally intelligent, it's like a muscle. Once you exercise it, it becomes stronger. If you practice flexibility, you become more flexible, and if you practice speed, you can become faster. So don't put a clock on yourself. But what I encourage you to do is to work on it consciously. And we're going to talk about habits. And one of the things you can do is develop habits around being emotionally intelligent. And what will happen with diligent application is that you will become better at it. So you will become faster at it in terms of your decision making. But when you start out, be patient with yourself, because remember the choice. You will need to process it through your cognitive mind, but in time, it will become a reflex action for you once you become highly skilled in terms of emotional intelligence. So thanks for that question. It says to me that you're committed to doing the work and are keen to see the results. Okay, so Carissa, can I move on?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. So we've just dealt with growing your emotional intelligence. And as I promised, we're going to talk about winning habits. So I have a poll for you. In our first webinar, I told you that for those who are transitioning from line staff to manager, you're going to have to leave some of your old habits behind, not because they're bad habits necessarily, but because your role is changing. So the things that you used to do are not fit for purpose anymore. So you need to develop some new habits. So here's the poll. It takes 21 days to build a new habit. True or false? So Carissa, could you go ahead and launch that poll for us, please? And let's see what folks have to say. Give you just a little bit more time before we move on. Okay, I'm going to ask Carissa to go ahead and close down the poll. And so we hear that 59% of you said that this is false. 41% of you think it's true. I'm curious. For those who think it's true, have you developed a habit in 21 days? Bang on the calendar. 21st day, automatically, it was a habit. Okay, share your experience with us in the chat box. We encourage you to do that. Okay, however, I have to tell you that it is actually false. It is a myth. There's nothing magical about the 21st day. So if you want to build a new habit, you have to work at it. And what we're going to do now is delve into some specific tips for building a new habit. And I'm going to use my own experience in terms of writing this book, because I had to build some new habits in order to get the book done. So I'll use that to illustrate the point. First of all, start small. If you make the change too big, you're not going to be able to stick with it. And you may be the most disciplined person in the world. If you are, this is not for you. This is for the rest of us. Okay? We need to start small. So when I started working on the book, I wasn't in the habit of writing. This is something that was new for me. So I had to develop the discipline, the habit of writing on a daily basis. And so I started with writing for 7 minutes. That's it, 7 minutes. Not a half an hour, not an hour, not half the day writing, 7 minutes, and I was done. I started small. Now, clearly, the book didn't get written in 7 minutes installments. So there was a point in time when it was sufficiently ingrained as a habit that I could then expand on the amount of time that I spent on it. Second tip, make your change SMART. And by SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely, because it has to be perfectly clear whether you did it or not. So my SMART habit was every day, Monday to Friday, I would write for exactly 7 minutes. So either I did it or I didn't do it. So that's tip number 2, make it SMART. 3, figure out your motivation. You need to have a compelling reason, a compelling why, so that you stick with it. Because there were some days when I didn't feel like writing, but I did it because I had a compelling why. I wanted to get this book done. In my coaching practice, as well as in my consulting practice and as an HR practitioner, I've seen so many people struggle with the transition to become a manager, and they don't need to. So that was my compelling why. I wanted to help all those people who struggle to make the transition. In the first webinar, I shared some statistics with you that more than 60% of new managers either fail outright or underperform in their first 2 years in their new role. That's more than half. So that was my motivation to develop the habit of writing daily. Tip number 4, link it to something that you're already doing. You want to make the habit sticky. So you want to put it on something that you're already accustomed to doing. So for me, I exercise Monday to Friday every morning, right? And part of that is because of my cancer history, and the other part is just, as you get older, it's just helps with your quality of life for you to stay active. So what I did is that I wrote immediately after my workout. I knew I was going to work out, so immediately after my workout, I would go and write for 7 minutes. So that's one of the ways that I was able to make writing a habit. Tip number 5, go public. Tell people what you're doing, because they're going to ask you about it. So if I had kept it a secret that I was writing this book, maybe there'd be days when I didn't write and nobody would ask me about it. So once I started telling people, then of course they'd ask me, how's the book coming? Are you done yet? So they help to hold me accountable. So as you're building your new habit, get a couple of accountability partners, people that you trust, but people who are not going to be afraid to call you out when you start slacking off. So that's tip number 5. And our final tip for building a new habit, reward yourself for getting it done. Okay? And if you don't get it done, then use some negative reinforcement as well. That also works. So how did I fit that into my writing habit? So I told you that I would write immediately after having my workout. And I rewarded myself by having breakfast. Because if I didn't write, I'd say to myself, you have to write before you have breakfast. So sometimes I didn't feel like writing, but hunger alone was sufficient motivation for me to sit down and get it done so that I could have my breakfast. Any questions about these tips for building a winning habit? Anything showing up in the
We
chat
do
box,
have
Carissa?
a question, and that question is, are you saying change and habit are the same?
Change does not have to be habitual, okay? Because you can change something and then change it again tomorrow. That's not a habit. But you need to change. If you want to build a habit, it requires you to change and then concretize that change so that it becomes something that you do naturally. But not all change will go on to become a habit.
We have another question. That question is, what if you're not comfortable sharing your new habit with someone?
So if there isn't a single soul in your life that you can trust to share this habit in, I have to wonder if it's a good habit you're planning to develop. Right? Go back to your why. Why is it that you want to develop this habit? Who else will benefit from this habit? And could you have one of the other beneficiaries of the habit become your accountability partner? Is there someone in your life who loves you unconditionally who could be your accountability partner? It really does make a difference when you have an accountability partner. Whereas number 5 says go public, it doesn't mean the whole world. It means have some folks who can support you, because that's what it is, support in building your habit. So for example, Carissa has been a tremendous support for me in writing this book. So from the time I told her I was doing it, and the book is dedicated to her, by the way, from the time I told her I was doing it, she would check in on me, how's the book going? So that, and it comes from a place of love and support. So even though I may have been slacking off and she asked me, I knew she's not judging me. She's helping me to achieve something that I have said I want to accomplish. Okay? So to the person who posed that question, really look deep within your heart and see if you can find even one person that you can share this with. Okay, I'm going to move on because the clock is against us this evening. All right, getting ready for when the buck stops. So how do you get ready for that? And of course, you know the expression, the buck stops here. So there are 3 words at the bottom of the screen: responsibility, accountability, and blame. And many people go through life without knowing the difference between these 3. And so we're going to make sure that you are not one of those people. We're going to tackle that right now. So as an individual contributor or a line staff, a technical worker, your primary responsibility is to get your job done. So you are to finish the tasks that have been assigned to you. That's your responsibility. When you transition to becoming a manager, your primary responsibility shifts from doing your job to ensuring that the job gets done. And the job is bigger now. We're talking about ensuring that your department, your team gets the job done. So your responsibility shifted from doing it yourself to ensuring that the team that's been assigned to you gets the job done. So what does that entail? Your goal is to transition from an exclusive or predominant focus on task to a combined focus on task and relationship. As an individual contributor, you focus on the task. As a leader, as a manager, you have to have a focus on relationship as well as task. And I'm not saying it's 50-50 because it will depend. And that's something that we're going to talk about in a subsequent webinar as well when we talk about situational leadership. But I need to flag this for you because some people are very detail oriented, very results oriented. They're high producers. They become managers and they keep going on their high trajectory without bringing their team along with them. So this is something for you to safeguard against. All right, so that's responsibility. So let's shift to blame and accountability now. So a few years ago, and the date is there from the newspaper, from the news item, July 16, 2016. I don't know if you remember this story, but there was an accused murderer who escaped from the courthouse. And this happened in Florida. He just shed his clothes, and took off. Okay, what happened immediately following that? Everybody started pointing fingers and attributing blame. So the sheriff started, casting blame on the council, the local government. He says, oh, he doesn't have enough manpower. He'd asked for a budget increase and he didn't get it. And the council members started blaming the sheriff. So, he's not handling the resources under his control the way that he needs to. And they were so focused on blame that nobody was focused on accountability. And we're going to see right now what that means. So here you have a table which contrasts a culture of blame against a culture of accountability. So if you're operating within a culture of blame, you believe that people are the problem. Okay, so when the guy escaped, the sheriff first thing is, I got to find somebody to put this problem on, and I'm going to put it on the council members. If you have a culture of accountability, you look at people as problem solvers. How can I work with the other folks who have a vested interest in this to fix this problem? If you're blaming, problem is merely a headache for you. Okay, you think that if you admit that you were at fault, that there was something flawed in the way that you manage the situation, that is going to haunt you. It may limit your career. If you have a culture of accountability, on the other hand, you say, look, this went south, it went wrong, but this is an opportunity for us to learn how to be better. Okay, we can get better. That's accountability. Blame focuses on who is wrong. The sheriff pointing the finger at the council members pointing the finger back at the sheriff. You find in fault. You're assigning punishment in some cases, especially if you can blame somebody who's below you in the organizational chart and dole out some punishment. Accountability, on the other hand, you're curious, what's wrong? Let's find out what happened and let's improve going forward. So that reminds me to say that blame is backward focused, accountability is future oriented, because you want to take the lessons and apply them in the future so that you don't make the same mistake going forward. In a culture of blame, people hide problems because they know punishment going to follow. People get involved in naming and shaming. They don't trust others because I'm sure you're familiar with the expression, throwing someone under the bus. Okay, a lot of that happens if you have a culture of blame. Contrast that now with a culture of accountability, where you want to find the problem so that you can fix them, where you want to learn from your mistakes, and where you trust your colleagues, you trust your direct reports, you trust your peers, you trust your supervisors, because you all want to be better going forward. So that's the difference between responsibility, blame, and accountability. Anything in the chat box, Carissa, before I move on?
No, you're free to move on.
Okay, great. And I'm looking at the clock and oh, I can't believe how quickly the time is going. So, but it's okay because we're on the final element that we're going to cover, and then we're going to open up so we can have some discussions and you can ask some questions if you want or comment on what you've heard. All right, so replenishing your cup. And anyone who knows me well knows that this is one area that I harp on. So, opinion poll. What's the minimum hours of sleep you need each night in order to function optimally, people? Not in order for you to get through, optimally. So the survey is up, the poll is up. Please go ahead and weigh in. Okay, we have, 94% have weighed in, and give you literally 2 seconds more, see if anyone else wants to get in, and then we'll go ahead and close that poll. All right, 61% of you weighed in at 7. Some of you, 31%, you think you can function optimally on 6 hours. And we had a few people who say that they think you need 10 hours. God bless you. 10 hours in order to function optimally. I hope you're getting it then. All right, so of course I'm going to share the result with you. According to the Mayo Clinic, an adult needs between 7 and 9 hours of sleep in order to function optimally. So between 7 and 9 is what research by the Mayo Clinic says that we need. So many of you may say, I'm not getting close to that, and I think I'm doing okay. Imagine how much better you could be doing if you were getting a good night's sleep, okay? So here's my mantra: self-care cannot be delegated. There are lots of things that I need to get done, and many of them I can delegate to someone else. So Meraki takes care of my communications and event planning. I've delegated that responsibility to them. But Carissa and her team can't take care of me. That's something I have to do for myself. So just before the COVID pandemic, I actually conducted a survey of Caribbean professionals. And one of the things that I was doing was looking at stress levels. And interestingly, 42% of the survey respondents described themselves as being stressed. The spectrum was from comfortable to stretched to stressed. And as you can see from the gray segment of the chart, 42% reported that they were in the stressed category. Close behind that was stretched. So 37% said that they felt stretched. Only 21% said that they felt comfortable. So think about where you fit, and go ahead and drop it in the chat box. Do you feel comfortable, stretched, or stressed as you navigate life right now? And I specifically pointed out that this was before the pandemic. So this stress and stretched had nothing to do with the pandemic. This was just regular work life. We also asked persons how many hours they worked within a given week. As you can see, the biggest chunk of the pie chart at 50.7% was for those people who reported working between 40 and 50 hours a week. But look, another 30% said that they work between 50 and 60 hours a week. All right, so only 7.5% of the respondents said that they work less than 40 hours a week. So you start to understand why people are feeling stretched and stressed now. And I also asked about sleep. I asked on average, how many hours of sleep do you get on a weeknight? Now, remember I said Mayo Clinic said we should be getting 7 to 9. Almost 60% said they're getting between 4 and 6. Between 4 and 6, 60%. So again, that's why people are feeling stressed and stretched. So you can't delegate self-care, but I have 10 tips on what you can do to take better care of yourself. I already spoke about the importance of exercise in your life. And I'm not sending you to run a marathon, okay? Remember the tips for building a habit? Start small. Start small and then you can build on it. Okay, I don't have to mention this because we've already highlighted the importance of getting adequate sleep. If you're at 6 hours now, see if you can edge that up so you get to the 7. If you're down at the 4 and 5, for sure, you need to try to get to bed earlier. Okay, proper nutrition is important. Food is our body's fuel. So if we're putting suboptimal fuel into our body, we're going to get suboptimal performance. And why is this important? Because as a manager, as a leader, if you are not at your best, you cannot show up for your team, for your organization, for yourself. Okay? Expressing gratitude, and you may have heard Oprah talk about the importance of expressing gratitude. The thing is, you cannot at the same time, you cannot simultaneously express gratitude and be stressed, because expressing gratitude lowers your stress levels. Okay? Practice mindfulness. Many of us go through our days worrying about what happened yesterday and what's going to happen tomorrow and lose track of what's happening in the moment. Focus on what's happening now. Practice mindfulness. Okay? Making or creating something also helps to alleviate stress. And it depends. You can, if you're someone who loves to cook, someone who enjoys art, enjoys music. My husband is a do-it-yourself, expert. He's MacGyver. So during this COVID pandemic, he was just building things, making stuff, doing things in the yard and in the house. And that help to relax him. Okay, so find a way to do something, to create something. For me, I wrote my book during the COVID pandemic. That's what I created. Engaging in positive imagery. And in my coaching practice, I use visualization a lot because our brains are amazing. They're fascinating. Your brain cannot, in terms of the neuroscience and how it responds, it cannot tell the difference between something you imagine and something you're actively experiencing. You will have the same physiological response. So if you imagine yourself in your happy place, your body will respond as if you're in your happy place. So that's a way to alleviate stress. Connecting with others. And of course, in the context of COVID, you have to respect the social distancing protocols, but reach out and communicate with others. Pick up the phone, have a conversation, make contact. We are social beings. We are meant to interact with others. And it's a myth that has existed, and we need to break the back of it, that it's a sign for weakness to ask for help. It really isn't. It's a sign of maturity. So if you need help, ask for it. And if someone offers help, don't hesitate to accept it. It doesn't mean that you're less than because you either asked for or accepted help. And number 10, breathe. Take a breath. Just inhale and exhale deeply and cleanse yourself. It does relieve stress. Okay? So 10 tips for self-care. And you may have noticed another one of my favorite quotations: you can't pour from an empty cup. Because if you're and especially for the women on the line, men, no disrespect to you, but it's something that women tend to do far too often. We tend to be caregivers, so we're busy taking care of everybody else and everything else, and don't take the time to take care of ourselves. And then we pay the consequences. Because if you don't give yourself rest, if you don't give your body what it needs, it will take it. So when your body decides, okay, I'm done, I break it down now so that you can take care of me, you don't want to wait until it gets to that point. Okay, so I just got in under the wire. Recap of the presentation. So we've dealt with growing emotional intelligence, developing winning habits, gave you some tips to do that. Talked about getting ready for when the buck stops. We talked about the difference between responsibility, accountability, and blame. And please try and eliminate blame from your vocabulary and from your life. Go for responsibility and accountability. And I ended up with replenishing your cup, how you can take care of yourself. Carissa, anything in the chat for me?
No, nothing in the chat box at the moment, but now is a great time to invite any questions. If you do have any, please let us know in the chat box and we'll be happy to respond.
Okay, while we're waiting for that, I'll just remind everyone that the next webinar will be next Wednesday evening, July the 8th, same time, 7 p.m. Eastern Caribbean time. And we invite you to ensure that you go ahead and register, and you should get the information. Of course, we'll push out the notices via social media as we typically do. And then webinar number 4, which will focus on managing systems and processes, that will be on July 15th. And of course, we'll be promoting that as well. Our 5th and final webinar is going to be by invitation only. It's an all-male focus group because we tend to overlook the guys and what their needs are. So I'm going to be inviting our male registrants over the series to come back and have a conversation so that I can ensure that my book meets your needs as well as it meets the needs of the women in the audience. Okay, anything yet, Carissa?
No, no questions.
Okay, so I will then say thank you and trust that the content this evening has been useful to you. And I'm going to hand it back over to Carissa so she has some final announcements to share with you. And thank you so much for joining us this evening.
I'm going to repeat what Ambassador has said and thank you for being here with us this evening. If you look in the chat box, you will see some messages from me. The first one is the survey link. That survey link will take you to where you need to fill out the survey form. You can give us your feedback on the content of this evening's session. And you will also find a link to claiming your bonus for attending and participating tonight. You will also see contact information for how to reach out to us or how to consume any of our other content. Our website is utdsinc.com. You could email us at info@utdsinc.com. And by Inc, I mean INC. There's also a link for our YouTube channel and our Facebook page. We will be posting a replay of this evening's webinar, and you will find that on Meraki's Facebook page, and I've included a link there for your review as well. So please have a look in the chat box for that information, and I'm just going to leave the webinar up a little bit longer so that you can access that. Thanks again for participating.
And a further reminder, the bonus gift, you only get it if you complete the survey, because like I told you, I'm working on my book, so I need some feedback from you. And the link will be active for 24 hours. So you have until 8 p.m. tomorrow evening to log on. Is it 24 hours, Carissa? Carissa?
Yes, that's 24 hours.
Okay, yes. So you have until 8 p.m. tomorrow evening to complete the survey. And when you complete the survey, you'll get the link to that bonus gift that I've prepared for you. All right, so
Hi,
thank
Carissa,
you so much.
I thought you said you were putting the link on the chat. I'm not seeing any link on the chat. Hello?
Yes, just hold on a minute. You'll get it shortly.
Oh.
Hold on. Thank
Okay,
you.
then,
Thank
no
you for
problem.
letting
All
us
right.
know.
You're welcome.
So
the link is there. I believe you just have to scroll up a bit.
Ah, okay. So I'm not sure if the person heard. Oh, so the thank yous are obscuring the link. So please scroll through. Carissa, would you please post Pam, could you please post the link again so that our guests don't have to work too hard for it?
I've just posted, or reposted, I should say.
Okay, great.